Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we plant under this hydrangea. So let's go. This beautiful hydrangea is called Strawberry Vanilla, and it is located on the west side of my house. It's considered a pinnacle hydrangea. And over the years, I've really neglected it. There was a lot of growth in the bottom of it, and I had a whole bunch of plants planted all around this bed. During the last week, I've really taken after this bed. It's a fairly large sized bed, and packed under this hydrangea, there were a ton of perennials here. Some of the perennials included Stella d'Oro daylilies, which I have a ton of in my landscape. So I dug those up, I divided them, and I added them as part of my backyard plant nursery to sell. There was a ton of ladies' mantle, which I absolutely love, and the only place I had it in my garden is under this hydrangea. So I dug all of it up, I divided it into single pieces, potted them up, and I ended up with, I think, 180 pieces, which I'll be using in future projects elsewhere in my yard. There was some spiderwort, which I like, but I didn't want in this flower bed. So I dug that up, divided it, potted it up, and added it as part of my backyard plant nursery. And then there were a few sections of bloodroot. I love bloodroot. I also have it in a lot of places in my yard. So I dug that up, potted it up, and I recently sold that on Facebook Marketplace because I just have so much of it and I wanted to share it with others. There was creeping phlox. Now, I do try different plants in different areas. The creeping phlox lived, but it never bloomed. And I think it's because it's just too shady here. This is definitely a shadier part of my yard. So I dug that up and I recently sold that on Marketplace as well. And that's a popular plant. A lot of people love it. So I was glad to share that plant. There are some spring blooming bulbs under here, such as daffodils. I did keep those here. All I had to do was some maintenance. So I just cut back the dead foliage. And then finally, there was some small hosta at the very base of this plant. I have that hosta in many other places of my yard. I dug it up and put that in my plant nursery as well. After I cleared this area, I then limbed up this hydrangea because it really was just too low to the ground. And I had this idea in my head that I could underplant and make it look really pretty under here. So I did limb it up. And after all of that was done, Mr. Budget Gardener helped me and he put down drip irrigation. He put two lines down, one closer towards the front of the bed and one in a little bit. And what I'm thinking of doing is putting annuals towards the front of the bed because I think impatiens would look beautiful, and I still have plenty of impatiens to put on the outside of this bed here. And then on the inside part of the bed, I was thinking of packing it with perennials. I did some research when it comes to underplanting under a hydrangea, and there were a lot of great ideas out there. The biggest thing that I took away from my research was you want to put plants that are going to thrive in the same conditions as your hydrangea. So for example, a lot of times hydrangea don't thrive in full sun. You need a little bit of shade with your hydrangea. So a plant like, let's say, lavender would not do well with a hydrangea because lavender thrives in full sun conditions. So you want to make sure whatever plants you're adding as a companion to your hydrangea will thrive in those same conditions. Some of the plants that I found that do really well with the hydrangea would include hosta, which wouldn't work for me because I have a lot of deer pressure, especially down here in this area. So I wouldn't want to add hosta, but you could add hosta given the right conditions. Ferns would look really pretty. Coral bells, well, we know that there are a lot of Heuchera or coral bells in different colors. That would also complement this plant nicely. A ton of different ground covers, such as ajuga or lamium, creeping jenny. The list goes on. You could definitely put a ground cover under here. And then for annuals, I already mentioned impatiens, begonias, coleus. Those would be wonderful annuals to add underneath your hydrangea. So I thought a little bit about this project, and I think I want to do 3 layers. At the very base of my hydrangea, I would like to add Heuchera or coral bells. I have a bunch of it in my backyard. It's a reddish color, and I think the reddish color next to this particular hydrangea would look really pretty. And I need to clean out that bed anyway because it's overgrown. And so what better way to clean it out than to pull out some perennials from a space that's overgrown and add it to a space that has now been cleaned up. So that would be for the inner layer, right beneath the base of this hydrangea. Then for the center layer, I was thinking of adding some sort of grass. And that's another plant that actually complements very nicely with a hydrangea. You could do blue fescues and a ton of other different grasses. Sedges would look really pretty under here. So we're going to go ahead and pick out something that has a grassy texture. And I have two options in my yard that I'm thinking of. And for the outer layer, we're going to pack that with annuals that I started from seed that really need to get in the ground. Definitely impatiens and possibly wax begonias. So let's go dig up the heuchera from my overgrown flower bed. We're on the east side of my house, and I've done a lot of planting projects down in this shady part of my yard. There's the hosta garden over there, and we've been putting a lot of shade-loving annuals and perennials over in this section. One of my goals over the next year is to keep working towards the backyard. In areas that I did have good intentions in the past, I've planted different perennials, and they've just gotten overgrown. And you know, that happens, right? So the good news is there are some beautiful plants that we can take from, such as right over here. That is the heuchera that I want to dig up. And also throughout this bed, there is more of that heuchera. It's just hidden and it needs a new home. So let's go ahead and start digging. I actually enjoy fully cleaning out a flower bed in order to restart it all over again. It's a good challenge for me. It seems to work. And that's basically what I did with this project, was clean out that flower bed completely. I feel like it is easier to visualize a project when you fully clean out a flower bed. Look how pretty that is. And this area gets a little more sun than the area that it's going in. So the color of these leaves will change a little bit when they're in a shadier location. So as we work our way towards the backyard more, ignore the weeds. There are just a few. Right there is the heuchera that we're going to dig up. Just by me digging up perennials from this weedy, neglected section of my yard, it motivates me to tackle this bed in the future. That's been my motto this year, has been one flower bed at a time. Otherwise, I think gardening can get very overwhelming quickly. What's exciting is right near this heuchera is a cranesbill geranium, and I know exactly where I want to move that at a later date. These heuchera are super happy, I think, to be going to a new home where they can really shine. And here's some more. And oh, look, I found a very pretty hosta tucked in here. That would be very pretty in the hosta garden. But let's stay focused. By the way, that same heuchera I have in this flower bed here. It's right there. And it looks really pretty. It definitely seeds itself very readily. I don't know the variety. I just know it has a nice reddish color to it. And I've divided and moved it many times over the years. So I think it's going to look really pretty under that hydrangea. So that section that these heuchera came from was pretty weedy. So what I need to do is go through it, pull out any leaves, pull out any weeds, cut back any of the dead foliage from last year because these plants were neglected. And then we'll go ahead and start getting these planted. So let me just clean them up first. In case you're wondering where the irrigation lines are in the bed, we have one towards the front, and that's where the annuals are going to go. And then we have one over here, and this is where some sort of a grass or sedge will go. So when it comes to the heuchera or coral bells, we're going to be planting them pretty much right at the base of the hydrangea. My hope is that the water that comes off of this drip here will also help keep this area wet, but you never know. So I'm still going to be adding water to the planting holes, especially for the heuchera. I know that the drip irrigation did run, so these sections over here are pretty wet. We get a lot of leaves here where I live, so We took our leaf shredder last year and we shredded a bunch of leaves, and then we just mulched a lot of the beds down here with those shredded leaves. Let me tell you, the worms absolutely love it. A lot of what I do is an experiment. Next year, I want to see how these Heuchera look under this hydrangea. If I feel that they're too dark, then I can remove them. And I have other Heuchera in my yard I can add just to get something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more red. But I want to give these ones a chance first because, again, the lighting is different here than in my backyard. So we want to see how these Heuchera will perform here. I'm definitely competing with the roots of the hydrangea, so I'm being mindful of that. I don't want to harm my hydrangea. And when it comes to a planting depth, I'm just planting it where the roots are under the soil, but I don't want to plant this too deep. Heuchera is one of those things that you want to make sure that the crown is exposed because that's where all the new leaves are coming up. But also, Heuchera like to heave themselves out of the ground in the wintertime. So it's a fine balance of planting them deep enough, but not too deep. What I will do is finish planting all of these Heuchera at the base of the hydrangea, and then I'll take you in for a close look so you can see what it looks like in the end. Time will tell how this Heuchera will look under here, but I think it'll look pretty. I didn't jam pack them in here. I definitely could have gone shopping in my backyard and gotten more of this Heuchera, but I'm just going to plant it the way that I planted it because I have full faith it's actually going to fill right in because I've used this Heuchera in a number of other places in my yard, and that's what it does. It fills in very quickly. And here's the other side. It definitely has a lot of green to it, but then it has that purplish red color on the bottom of the leaves, which I think makes it look very pretty. So now let's tackle the next layer, which would be some sort of a grass or sedge. We've been visiting my backyard plant nursery quite a bit. I have a type of carex or sedge over here. I want to pull those out and I want to place them around the hydrangea because I'm thinking that that's what I want, but I'm not quite sure. I have quite a few of them in here. So let me get them pulled out and I'll show you what they look like. And in case you're wondering about the name, it's called Feather Falls. It's a type of carex. Isn't this a shame? The plants were healed into the ground for over the winter, and I bought these probably, I want to say 3 years ago, and at the time it was probably this size. And then I divided it, put them in little tiny pots, 4-inch pots, and I'll tell you afterwards how many pots I ended up with. But this is what it looks like, and it's very pretty. It has green in the center with a white edge. And because I have a lot of this, I think this would look really pretty around the hydrangea. But what I'm going to do is show you next the plant that I would love to have around the hydrangea. I just don't have a ton of it. It's right here near my pond. It's this golden colored sedge. I think that would look really pretty. And that's all I have are those 4 pieces. I just don't have enough there to make an impact around the hydrangea. But what I'm motivated to do is come in and divide each of these pieces on a different day and just keep adding to my stock. But that's okay. I think the plant that we've chosen will look just as pretty. Let me get all of these guys placed around the hydrangea and I'll take you in for a closer look at how I plant one of them. So I ended up with 12 pots, and what I'd like to do is divide a few of them down. So on this side here, this is as close as they're going to get all the way around. So over on this side here, as well as on the other side over there, I need to divide these ones down more so that they're spaced as closely as these are here. It's hard to see in the camera, but that's how close they're going to get spaced, about a foot apart. The other thing is we need to add drip irrigation going this way. So we can do that after this project is done. Since all of these plants are totally growing out of their pots, we're going to see if the plants come right out of the pots or if we're going to have to cut the pots. But I'm just squeezing the sides of the pot just to loosen up the soil. And I'm just tugging, and the good news is it did come out pretty easily out of the pot. I can go ahead and just remove the leaf litter from the previous year. And I've had success dividing these over the years. That's why I ended up with so many plants when I only bought just one. I'm just pulling out some of the dead grass from last year. You see me using this in a lot of videos. I used to use a kitchen knife for the longest time. I finally bought this. It's just a hand pruning saw, and it's by Corona. When I make my cut, I want to make sure I'm not cutting right above my irrigation line. I'm just going to try to find a place in the center where I can make my cut. But I know that when I make my cut, some grass blades will fall off, and that's okay. Just want to be careful. It's a sharp tool. You don't want to cut your fingers or your hand. And there, now we have two pieces. They look a little skimpy, especially this one, but it's okay. I tell you, they grow super fast, so I'm not worried about that. In terms of spacing, I know that this is about how far I want each plant to be, so I'm just using it as a guide. And I'll be planting these on the back side of the irrigation line, just to be consistent with what I'm doing. The irrigation did run, so the soil is nice and moist. Just gonna backfill, push down, backfill. It's a pretty easy process. The more I plant this, I think this is gonna look very pretty because the hydrangea will eventually have white colored blossoms on it, but then the white colored blossoms will turn pink. And I think I don't want a ton of red or pink beneath this hydrangea because of that reason. And the impatiens that we're going to be planting will be, a lot of them will be a pink color. All right, time for me to plant the rest of these. Well, I turned 10 pieces into 18. And even though they're pretty small, they will fill in over time, no problem. And what's fun about a project like this is actually I'm noticing the sun pattern. It's early morning and it's pretty sunny here. So it's good to take note of that because I know in the afternoon this area is pretty shady. Once we put the mulch in here, this is really going to look pretty. But the next thing we're going to do is add some pops of color. Let's go shopping for some impatiens and begonias. I have been tempted to go to big box stores to salvage, to save some of the plants that are on the clearance racks, because you can easily revive a bad looking plant with a little TLC. But I've held myself back because I know I have plants in my own yard that I started from seed that are still pretty, but they need some TLC. So that's why I'm doing a lot of projects shopping my own yard, because I just have a lot of plants that need to get in the ground. So let me pull a bunch of these plants and let's get them planted out in our space down below. So I have this lime green coleus. There is no special name to it because I collect the seeds of a lot of my plants, including this coleus. And when I collected the seeds, I specifically wrote on the bag, lime green coleus. So we are going to get these planted first, and then we'll plant the impatiens. Just trying to figure out where the irrigation line is so that I can then space out things. I'm just using my feet to space things out, and I want to see how far I can get with the plants that I have, and we can always adjust afterwards. I went all the way around and I still have left over, and at this point in the year I don't want to hold these over for another project. I would rather pack plants in heavily in certain sections, so that's what we're going to do here. Just filling in the gaps, adding some more. Okay, I spaced out the coleus the best that I could. I'm going to go ahead and get them planted. After that, let's tackle some impatiens. In a strange kind of way, I'm actually glad that I had all these annuals still left over, because now I can use them in projects. Otherwise, I don't know if I'd be as motivated about doing certain projects like this. But knowing that I had these annuals waiting to be planted kind of motivated me. I'm very happy that we put a couple of lines of drip irrigation in this bed. We just couldn't do that a week ago because it was packed with plants. And there's something very satisfying, at least for me, with redoing a bed. Just emptying it out and redoing it. It's definitely a lot more work to do it that way, but it just seems to work for me. And one thing I really enjoy doing is getting plants, getting them on sale or for free. And if I don't have a home for them, at least just getting them put in my nursery, because the plant nursery is for, something I do kind of as a side business to sell plants, but it's also a place for me to hold over plants if I don't know where I want to put them. I think we all fall victim to getting a plant, not knowing where to put it, and just putting it somewhere in the landscape temporarily. The problem with that is the temporarily part is not as temporary as we were hoping it would be. So if you have a space in your yard, it doesn't have to be very big, you can call that your holding area, your temporary holding area. And that's a good place to keep plants, kind of like a little nursery. My mother-in-law gave me that idea years ago. I just didn't know where to have a nursery in my yard for holding over plants. So I'm glad I was able to come up with a spot that worked. I knew I didn't have a ton of this particular type of coleus. So I figured, why not just get rid of them in one area? And what perfect area to get rid of them than down here, because I was trying to get something that was brighter, something that was a chartreuse color. I was originally thinking about that grassy carex or sedge, but I'm happy with this. I've made videos showing my process for collecting the seeds from different plants, including coleus. I'll be sure to put a link to those videos down in the description below. It's actually a pretty simple process. If your coleus is blooming and the blossoms on there are still very pretty, like a purple or a pink color, then that means the seeds are not ready. And I'm not too picky. Sometimes the plants that come up are different from the parent plant. I'm okay with that, because a lot of what I'm doing here anyway, it's just for my home garden. In terms of spacing, I did the best I could with the coleus, but I am not going to worry if it's, the spacing is not 100% accurate. It's close enough. It's going to fill in and make a nice impact in this area. Another plant that would look really pretty near a hydrangea is a stilbe. And I recently acquired a bunch of plants, including a stilbe, from someone on Marketplace. She wanted to have her flower beds thinned out a little bit, and so she was generous enough to offer free plants. So I was able to acquire a bunch of astilbe, and in a flower bed right next to this one, I had recently dug out some hosta, because last year the deer had nibbled that hosta, and even though they hadn't nibbled it this year, I was done with that. So I dug out all the hosta that was there, and it's an empty slate, and drip irrigation has also been added to that area. So I will be adding astilbe there. I'm not sure if I'll add anything else, but I think astilbe would look really pretty right there. I love making these kind of videos because they motivate me and inspire me, and my hope is that they inspire you as well. And together we can learn what works, what doesn't work, what looks good, what might look a little better. Some of these coleus are definitely small, like this one, but it's okay. I just want to get them in the ground at this point, get some drip going to them. And I'm trying to be good about fertilizing my annuals weekly. I like to just use Miracle-Gro. It's what works for me. I just mix it up in a watering can. I'll make sure I water all these in just to give them that extra amount of water, because our daytime temperatures have still been in the 90 plus degree Fahrenheit range, and it's been extremely humid and hardly any rain. That's the one key that I've learned when it comes to planting anything, is make sure you're giving that plant a lot of water. Even if you have drip hooked up to it, it's probably still a good idea. More water is better than less with brand new plantings. Anything I plant down here, it will also be good to see if the deer nibble on them. We don't have bunny pressure here. I don't have any rabbits, at least not so far, but definitely we do have lots of deer. I'm looking forward to seeing what this flower bed looks like after we've added a nice layer of mulch. I haven't had mulch on my flower beds for a many number of years. And I think the biggest reason is because I've spent a lot of years just amending the soil with my own compost, with shredded leaves, but the time has come to add some mulch to these beds. Granted, it's cloudy, but you can see things a little bit better in this bed with the Heuchera, the sedge, as well as the Coleus. It's all looking very good. I'm looking forward to seeing how this Coleus does over time. So now it's time to get those Impatiens in the ground. When it comes to the Impatiens, I want to make a lot of impact. Plus, I have a lot of Impatiens on hand still. So the irrigation line is right here. I'm going to plant one Impatiens right here and then two more on either side of it over on this side of the irrigation line. This is the do as I say, not as I do part of my video. These Impatiens have become tall and leggy over time, which is natural because they've been in their cell packs and they've been in a shadier area, not getting as much sun and all those things. Now would be a great time for me to come in and cut these back so that they can reflush from the base. But guess what? They're going to reflush from the base no matter what. So I'm not going to cut them back because I want color in this bed. I don't want to just remove all the color. So I will just keep them as is. And if I wasn't going to give the Miracle Grow, now would be a great time in these planting holes to put a slow release fertilizer. But I'm not going to bother with that because I just want to get them in the ground and just start giving them their weekly fertilizer. And even though I have lots of different colors of Impatiens, because I collected the seeds of those as well, so it's just a whole mix of colors, I'm not worrying about what colors go next to what colors. It's literally going to be just a random assortment of colors. But what I am going to try to do is in each grouping of 3, I definitely want to have at least one of the 3 plants blooming. Okay, it's going to take me a while to get all these Impatiens planted. I'm going to get them planted, I'm going to water everything in, and then I'll show you what everything looks like when I'm all done. I know I show this area all the time, but I have a purpose for today. See the Impatiens here? These are Impatiens that were started on the same exact day as the Impatiens that we planted today. But I never got those Impatiens into the ground or into pots. Had I done that, they'd all look like this. It's okay. It's happening. Slowly but surely, it's happening. As for these Impatiens, which there's still a lot left, it'll be their turn next. And what I'm doing in the meanwhile is I pull the Impatiens forward because what happens is the ones that are in the center end up not blooming, which is why you see some here that don't have blooms on them. I've just started pulling them forward. Until then, they get water and they get love. As for this flower bed, what a difference, right? The only thing it's lacking now is mulch. So let me go ahead and add a nice layer of mulch. project is officially done. Yay! I am so happy with how this came out. I'm very, very pleased. And time will tell how everything does, from the Heucheras to the Carex or sedge. And the annuals should do okay as well. I will be sure to add supplemental water to all the plants because it's just been so hot, so dry, and I want to make sure I give them the best chance of survival. The mulch definitely just adds that additional pop that this bed needed. There is a lot of open area, but I'm learning this year that sometimes simpler is better. I have a tendency to pack my beds sometimes, and I think sometimes it's okay to leave some open gaps. And even though I have a lot more annuals I could pack in here, wow, there are other flower beds that are calling my attention. And this is the first flower bed that you notice when you come up my driveway. So it really is about curb appeal. And I am happy with how this really came out. There's a tree right over there. And I'm thinking, because now I'm motivated on a different day, that it might look pretty to take that same type of heuchera that's over there and dig some more from my weedy area out back and plant it around that tree. And then this open area right here, how pretty would that look with the astilbe that I recently dug from someone else's yard and is potted up and ready to go. I think that the astilbe would look so beautiful in this section. What do you think? Well, friends, it's time for me to go inside and get a nice ice cold lemonade. I'd love to know what you think about this space. And if I didn't put Impatiens and Coleus in here, what other plants might look pretty towards the front of the bed? I'm thinking annuals, but I'd love to know what you think. And also, in the space next to here, where I'm thinking of putting the astilbe, do you think that would look nice? I'd love to get your input on that. I hope you've been able to stay cool. If you've had a lot of rain, I hope you have a dry day. If you haven't had a lot of rain, I hope you get rain. We are getting some tomorrow, finally, fingers crossed. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.